Hi, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz, and this is Ward Talk. We talk about the issues of Ann Arbor and what the city is doing to deal with all their issues. And today we have a very special guest, Elizabeth Nelson from Ward 4. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me, Bonnie. It feels like it's been a long time since we talked.
Yes. And with a long time, there are a lot of things that have happened, a lot of changes. And I did mention when I was just setting up with you that I appreciate so much the newsletter that you send out on Sundays to inform the public what's going on for the week, especially usually the Monday night meeting, all the issues you're voting on and discussing. And I just want to make a mention that it is available online. If you want to, is that on the regular a2.gov website?
No, actually, it's on my personal website,
Okay.
A2Elnell, A2ELNEL.com. And I'm always excited to hear from somebody who appreciates it, because it's something that I put a lot of effort into, because I really do believe in having information about our city work more accessible to people. I pack it full of links because I really don't want you to necessarily have to trust my word for it. If it's an issue that you care about, I really want you to be able to find information easily on the city site. And it's just something that I really believe in.
Yeah, well, I'm inviting everybody to sign up for it. And if you sign up, you get it every week in your mailbox, as I do. So let's start with your ward, which is Ward 4, and talk a little bit about what's going on with Ward 4. I know that includes a large area of not only housing, but also commercial areas. So I know there's a new development that is not in play, but is on the table. There's a new development off Main.
Yeah, there's a development that's going through planning right now. Mm-hmm. We just recently annexed some parcels into the city. They had been township islands. And this is a cluster of, I think, 15 parcels off of Main, just south of the golf course. And right now there are just 11 houses on it. It's legitimately underutilized for as close as it is to downtown. And there's a developer who is eventually going to ask City Council to rezone it to put, I think, 450 units of housing in this location. And
let me ask you this. Does that involve clearing an area where there are already houses, or is there a big empty space that they want to use for construction?
Oh, there's not a big empty space. There are houses back there. I actually was not very aware of this particular little nub of a street. It's real tucked in there. I think it's like even a dirt road. It's just slightly south of Scioto Church, so it doesn't quite line up with that intersection. And so they will be buying 11 houses and knocking them down to put apartment buildings up there. And I think one of the things that's concerning for some residents that I have talked to is because it doesn't line up with Scioto Church, they've had to do some interesting arrangements with in and out to this development. And so it would be like 450 housing units, and people would be able to come out on Main, but only be able to turn right. And then a whole lot of traffic would be funneled south to that area, like right on South Main, right across from Bush's grocery store. And so there's concern that 450 units is probably an awkward number to put in that exact spot. And what's interesting to me is that it is kind of silly that there was only 11 houses back there. We certainly could put more housing back there. And the original zoning that was recommended by staff would have suggested we could put like 84 units of housing there. And going from 11 to 84, that would be a really good improvement in terms of making better use of that parcel. But residents
but you would say that as more comfortable.
I'm sure that would, yes, that would definitely be more comfortable to the residents in Ward 4 who understand that that particular location gets a lot of traffic around Pioneer High School. around the grocery store, like the fact that it is as near as it is to exits and on-ramps for 94. It's one of the challenges of Ward 4, right? So we have corridors that are quite near to downtown. And so you can think optimistically that the people who would live in that apartment building might just step on a bus and go straight downtown to a job. But at the same time, we have a lot of people who live in Ann Arbor who are commuting out. And our convenience to 94 means that people, not everyone is commuting downtown. Not everybody is going in that direction. We have traffic going in all directions. And so it's just something to think about. And like I said, I know a lot of residents have reached out to me and expressed concern about it. 84 units of housing versus 450 units of housing is quite a leap. And now one of the things that has been promoted about this development, one of the things that's remarkable, the developer has said that he's doing it all electric, which is understood to be environmentally more responsible. We believe that this is better to have all electric everything in a development rather than using natural gas. And so that is some of what the developer is presenting as a community benefit. Allow me to put in this density and see that I'm doing something that's worthwhile that perhaps should be rewarded. So it's a serious conversation.
So at this point, you will be considering what they want to present as, this is what we want to do. So this is what kind of zoning changes we need to have. That's where you're at now?
Right. Well, planning, it has not gone through planning yet. I don't believe it's gone through planning. A development like this that requires rezoning will go through planning, and the planning commission will make a recommendation as to whether they think it should be approved or not. And then it comes to council, and then council ultimately makes a decision. And in situations like this, we often look to the representative from the given ward. Like we recently approved a development on Burton Road in Ward 3, and Councilmember Radina did a whole lot of behind the scenes work with residents, talking to them about their concerns, and we were able to arrive at a compromise around access that really resolved some of the concerns that the neighborhood had. And so I reached out to Councilmember Radina about that particular development, and I said, what kind of conversations are happening in the neighborhood? What are people talking about this development? Does it seem like something that the neighborhood feels good about? And so, yeah, these are the kind of things that we try to talk about amongst each other.
Mm-hmm. And so it just goes to show the importance of your neighbors reaching out to you and letting you know what their concerns are or what experiences they've had. You really need their input to help you explore these possibilities and make decisions.
I absolutely agree with that. I feel really strongly about that. And I know that people have different feelings about how much neighborhood residents should be giving input or how much that input should be influencing council decisions. But I feel really strongly that we don't have very much authority at city council, and what authority that we have, I think that we should be using it to represent the concerns that are raised by residents.
Okay, and moving on to a related issue is, again, could be a traffic concern, is the mall, the Briarwood Mall, which is in your ward. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I remember reading a little while ago that they were considering repurposing the building since, they've lost a lot of business due to the pandemic, and maybe considering how the mall could be used for other purposes, which could also bring in other types of traffic rather than just short-term shoppers. What do you know about that, and what are the issues?
I don't know a whole lot about it, but I'm probably hearing the same kind of rumors that other people are, which is that we have known for some time that shopping malls like Briarwood have lost a lot of business to online shopping, and this pandemic has just been devastating. And so, I actually had reason to go to the mall a couple of times in the last month, and it was a little bit shocking. What I am hearing is that before the pandemic, there was talk about Briarwood possibly being redeveloped in some way, maybe on a 10-year timeline. And what I'm hearing now is it's probably closer to a 5-year timeline. And, you know, Briarwood is an excellent location for housing to go. It's very close to downtown. I understand that there's already park and ride there. It really is an underutilized space if you look at the parking lot. And so there's real opportunities to redevelop that. And, you know, it borders on State Street, and we're already having conversations about reimagining South State Street and having development over there look a little different, because as an entrance to the city, South State Street is not particularly inviting. And it also is sort of a lot of buildings and parking lots. So there's a whole lot of potential change in like coming down the pike in Ward 4 it's inevitable. It's inevitable, and this pandemic has sort of sped everything along in terms of how we use space and how shopping is happening. This style of shopping is just not really successful anymore.
And in the minute we have left before our break, is it really up to the owner of the mall to make decisions on what changes they want to make? Who makes decisions about that property?
Well, presumably the people who own the mall, if they want to redevelop it, it's going to depend on how that area is zoned. And I have to confess that I'm not an expert on what the zoning for the mall is, what would be permissible there. But if it complies with zoning, then I imagine that all they would have to do was present site plans, because there are rules about how the size of things that you build and what kind of permissions that you need to have. And so that all of those things go through our building department. It doesn't typically come to city council or planning commission unless there's a need for rezoning or there's a need for some special change, because we do have a master plan, and we have every parcel in the city that's not a township island has a specific zoning that is sort of a recipe of like, these are all the things that are permissible, and it's all in a book. You know, we have this big zoning code of all these letters and numbers to tell you exactly what's permitted on any parcel.
Well, when we come back, let's move on to the whole city of Ann Arbor, and we'll take a look at some of the issues that is around the whole city. Okay?
Okay.
And this is Bonnie Gabowitz. We're going to take a break now, and we'll be back.
As rivals, we don't always see eye to eye.
Like who scored the best recruits?
Who's gonna be who?
And whether we wear green
or blue.
But one thing we can all agree on to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Wear a mask.
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 The ball's in your court, Michigan.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz, your host for Ward Talk. We're talking with Elizabeth Nelson from Ward 4. And before we start, I just want to make sure that you know you can always tap into our shows. You can make comments. You can ask questions. We'd love to hear from you. You can go on our website, ctn@a2gov.org. That's an email. Or go on Twitter at twitter.com/CTN Ann Arbor. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, Councilmember Nelson, let's start with the short-term rentals. That has been a big topic, and I know in the previous makeup of the last council, which now has 5 new members, there was a decision on restricting short-term rentals with very specific requirements, such as the owner had to live in the building in
Mhm.
order to have a short-term rental. And of course, there are a lot of people who have bought property specifically for the short-term rentals, for day rentals, for weekend rentals, for the university events, whatever. But now we have a new council. So is there now a shift in how you're dealing with the requirements and restrictions?
Yes, so when we passed this ordinance in September, we were very close to passing it, and we were close to the end of our discussion. And Councilmember Romlawi said, you know, I have compassion for people who have investments and have had expectations, and we're pulling the rug out from under them. Why don't we, and typically, or as it was drafted, it was going to take effect in 45 days. And
That's shocking. That's shocking in that suddenly puts all these owners adrift with their property.
I suppose, but we had been talking about for many months. And so this had been, I mean, we had been talking about it for over a year, to be perfectly honest.
Mhm.
So it's hard to say that it exactly came out of nowhere. And these properties are of value. I mean, even as they exist furnished, our ordinance only restricted rentals under 30 days. And so I know that my husband and I were in a situation where we were in a month-to-month lease in a furnished apartment. There is a market for such things. It's just not Airbnb for like a weekend at a time. But at any rate, it was in September when we were about to pass this, Councilmember Romlawi suggested, let's postpone enforcement until March 1st of 2021. And it was really that amendment to the ordinance that created the opportunity for the new council to come in and say, all right, we want to tweak this, we want to change it. And the changes are concerning to me because when we did actually, proposed change, which is not yet drafted, we've not yet seen it, the proposed change would say, those of you who have invested here and have properties and have been maintaining them as short-term rentals, even if you violate the terms of the ordinance, we're going to let you in the back door and sort of make an exception for you. And we don't actually know how many housing units we would be crafting this kind of exception for. We do know that there are 50 property owners who have threatened a lawsuit about this ordinance, the 50 investors who own properties. Again, we don't know exactly how many housing units, but the proposal is an amendment that would benefit a relatively small number of investors, not even all of them local Ann Arbor residents. And we haven't seen it yet. We've asked a majority of council voted to ask staff to craft this, and I don't feel good about it because I feel like Airbnb is something that we really need to regulate, and the idea of like crafting these exceptions it's unnecessary. You know, communities across the country and across the globe are realizing what a hazard it is to have all these Airbnb housing units. They're really taking away housing that people could be living in year round. And if we were going to rip off the Band-Aid at any point, now would be the time to do it. And the lawsuit that's threatened, you can't file a lawsuit for more than what your actual damages are. And what we are telling people is, yes, you have a lovely investment property. Yes, you have taken the time and trouble to furnish it well and maintain it to a high standard. It retains all of that value if you rent it for more than 30 days at a time. It retains all of the same value that it had as a property that you own and could be sold, and it has value as a residential unit. And so the difference between what they had as a value using it as a short-term rental and what they retain as a value as a residential property, I mean, that's the only thing that could ever be a subject of a lawsuit. And I just think it's more important for our community to have a really clear policy around these short-term rentals. And the thing the ordinance that was crafted by staff in September is very, very clear. It's tied to zoning. It's consistent with everything that we believe about commercial enterprise. Like, we have zoning for neighborhoods that doesn't permit somebody to open a hotel down the block. And you can't have like a restaurant on the corner. And I know that there would be, in some situations, maybe people wish they had a restaurant up the street on the corner, but that's a different kind of neighborhood. I mean, we're going to be having conversations about the master plan, but right now our zoning really does identify like these are neighborhoods of the city that are meant to be for residents. And a lot of residents feel strongly about, I bought my house here to raise my kids here, and I expected to have neighbors. And now what I have is this apartment building next to me where cars are going in and out, people are going in and out with suitcases, and I effectively don't have a neighbor.
So you're saying it really does affect the whole neighborhood?
Oh, it definitely does. I had a conversation with a resident just last week who was describing to me what it's like to live next door to a short-term rental. And it's just different. It's different, but more importantly, we constantly talk about the value of this housing that is closer to the center of the city and that is more accessible to the amenities downtown, and how we want more people living in close proximity so they can walk and bike to all of these wonderful things that are convenient. Well, the neighborhoods that have that accessibility, I mean, there's a neighborhood in Ward 4, Lower Burns Park, is quite accessible to downtown, the university, the stadium. It is that neighborhood that properties are really being snapped up for short-term rentals. And how much more wonderful would it be for us to be able to have more residents living there who have a lifestyle where they can walk every day to these things.
Mm-hmm. And I know other council members on this show in previous sessions have talked about the loss of real estate available for people to buy. You made reference to that. Is it possible that you could find some kind of middle ground where you can have these rentals and yet still have more real estate open and available for more people to move into and actually create neighborhoods?
Well, the truth is that we actually did strike a middle ground in September. There are areas of the city that have mixed use zoning, and a house happens to be on a parcel that happens to have zoning that would permit short-term rentals. It's just these blocks and streets that are in the middle of residential areas that don't happen to be zoned for short-term rentals. So moving ahead, what I would anticipate is application of our ordinance as we passed it in September. What that would mean is that people who want to endeavor a short-term rental business, they would study our zoning and they would find the locations where it's permitted. Because it's not that it's not banned everywhere. It's just limited to very specific areas of the city where it's zoned for mixed use.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, this is a hot topic. I'm sure we'll be talking about again, but thank you for that clarification. In the last newsletter that you just sent out, you made reference to your concerns about the council having responsibility and accountability for their decisions. And I know you have a new makeup of your council. What are the issues that you see that you think needs more addressing?
Well, I mean, as you know, based on the newsletters that I have been sending out, I really am actively seeking more meaningful community conversation about the issues before council. I really do believe that we should try to reduce the number of situations where somebody looks out their window and sees something happening and says, why is the city doing that crazy thing? Like, I hate for that to happen. I hate getting an email where a resident is telling me, look, I was going up the street and I saw this crazy thing. Like, what in the world is the city doing? And I end up chasing it down and trying to figure out what's happening. There's a whole lot that goes on in the city that city council never sticks their finger in. And one of the things that we have said that we think has a serious impact on residents and that we should have more of a voice on and more of a meaningful community conversation about is how we reconfigure our streets. And so there are a couple things on our agenda tonight around street management. Basically, we're going to be funding planning for a continuation of the Healthy Streets program. This was something that was an experiment last year where we could have residents on residential streets could have signs erected like local traffic only to reduce traffic on small side streets. And then on a handful of major streets, there were cones set up and what appeared to be sort of construction barriers to expand space for bikers and walkers on streets like Broadway and Division, Packard, and South Main. And there were a lot of challenges on those major roads when we did it last year. We're going to try it again this year and try to do it a little bit more effectively so that the signage is more clear for people and it's a little less confusing. We voted to approve that last year, and then we ended up passing a resolution to end the experiment early because there was so much concerns expressed by residents who were really seeing like safety hazards. We have a resolution on tonight's agenda that says that we should not have council approval for traffic reconfigurations like this that drastically alter like the number of lanes or like reduce the number of lanes of cars moving on major thoroughfares. And the idea of this resolution is to say, you know, we trust staff do their studies. Part of their work is having public engagement meetings. They already talk to the neighbors. They find out what the neighbors think. And we don't need an extra layer to this process. They already do all that hard work. And so we can just trust them. And I think the challenge for me is that I'm not really interested in simplifying a process that's going to have a huge impact on residents and removing a layer of more conversation. I mean, the truth is that our city staff does an excellent job of engaging the public, but I am constantly hearing from residents who say, I never got the postcard. I didn't know there was a meeting. And, you know, as much as I do to try to amplify awareness about these meetings, if something's going to have a huge impact on residents, I really think it should go to council. And there are reconfigurations around town that the neighborhoods don't feel like they were properly consulted on, and they didn't go to council. And there's still a lot of frustration, for instance, about North Maple. I biked it a handful of times last fall. The bike lanes are really nice on North Maple, but I am told that anybody who lives off of North Maple has lots of negative things to say about that road configuration and how it has impacted like getting in and out of that area. And I just feel like we need to have more conversations, not fewer.
It sounds like sometimes things look good on paper, but aren't necessarily the best decisions. So is that?
Yeah, that's kind of what it is like, really. I mean, and when I was on council really early on, we had a decision before us. It wasn't a traffic reconfiguration; it was actually a sidewalk on Traver, and that's Ward 1. It's not even Ward 4. But I had so many residents contacting me and saying, "We know that a sidewalk on the street looks right on a map because it's right around the corner from a school, but please come here and look at it and let us show you." And it was one of these things where like you went and looked and you realized they're going to be taking out massive trees. There were this crazy terrain that was going to require it was a very, very strange place to have a sidewalk based on how much construction was going to be required, how much like destruction was going to be required to make room for it. And
well, this just shows the complexity of making decisions that are really affecting neighborhoods. I think it's really important that you give us this specific information so we can really appreciate why sometimes decisions take a while to be made and things just don't happen fast.
yeah.
And I want to thank you, Elizabeth Nelson, for visiting us today and enlightening us on these few topics that we have discussed. So thank you and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And we are glad that you came to visit us and we want to hear from you. So please visit us at our email address, ctn@a2gov.org. And you can also visit us on Twitter at twitter.com/CTN in Arbor. I'm Bonnie Gabowitz, your host. I'll see you next time.